Now, I'm very delighted to have with me here Ellen. Now, we first met in Spain back a few years, and you're from Vancouver in Canada.
I'm from just outside of Vancouver in delightful Surrey, BC.
Well, Ellen, if you could just take us back to when you first started independently travelling.
I was a single mom, so I didn't travel for years and years. It
Right.
wasn't until my son was, after he graduated as a support person, I got tired of looking at the same four walls and thought, what am I doing here? So I took off again. I went to Costa Rica for 6 months.
And that was your one of your first solo trips, was it?
First solo travel, yeah.
A lot of those places, people say they're dangerous to go there.
I never worried about that. Probably the biggest problem in Costa Rica is theft. And that's across the board for travelers. That's for expats who live there.
Was there issues or things you had to overcome? Were there things holding you back, like fears of travelling on your own?
No, I never got into that. I never even thought about that. I just went and did it. I don't think of those countries personally as dangerous. But maybe it's because I have traveled a lot in them. With some reservation, I did a lot of research. I found out, for example, that it's not a good idea to even take a taxi in Managua. So it's just, you'd really have to just kind of talk to the local people or speak to the people wherever you're staying. I remember an incident when I was in Panama. The hostel manager was very clear when we entered the hostel, do not go into this area. They showed it on a map, et cetera, et cetera. One kid who actually happened to be a Canadian, and I say kid, he was probably around 25 years old, he went into one of the areas they told him not to, and guess what? He not only lost his wallet, he lost his passport. So there's a certain amount of common sense, in that case, when someone tells you not to go somewhere, it's probably for a reason if they live there.
What would be your advice to women in our age group that are looking to independently travel?
I would suggest they become really knowledgeable about the countries that they're going to visit. Use some discretion. In Canada and the States, we have government websites that have warnings about places not to go. I think you have to read them, but also take them with a grain of salt. I remember when I was traveling in Costa Rica, I checked it and it was like, don't go to Costa Rica, it's so dangerous. Like a single woman, forget it. And just, as I said, just follow basic rules for not being a victim. And I think that's important too, is that you have the mentality of not being a victim. If you're terrified and anxious, you're likely to be a victim. If you're walking there like you've lived there for the last 30 years and you know the streets of the city inside out, you're less likely to be victimized. The point is to be aware. Just be aware. As I say, walk along like you own the streets, like you've been there all your life. If you have to take a map, go inside a store and look at the map. If you're walking along with a map in one hand and your camera in the other, guess what? That says tourist, screen tourist.
Well, what about the social aspect of it, travelling on your own? Does it, was there a sense of loneliness when you're travelling solo?
I didn't experience that because I made it a point when I was traveling solo to stay in hostels. And most hostels have kitchens and living spaces, living rooms, and it's just a great place to connect with people, while you're cooking, So you make friends with people then and socialize then. And I would stay in dorms. If you travel as a single person and go to a hotel and close your door, you're isolated. And I think that would exaggerate the isolation. So that's why I made a point when I was traveling on my own, is to be in hostels and be surrounded by, well, certainly in the dorms. That was before they had mixed dorms, but I'd be exposed to a number of women, and I get lots of social interaction then. And also, too, I was traveling in another time. I traveled, I went Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and but before I got to Guatemala, I met a couple, a German couple, in a hostel in Holbox, which is an island off the north coast of Mexico. Highly recommended, by the way. It'll never be a Cancun because it's built on sand, so you can only build places that are 2 stories high. It'll never have big hotels. Great place, Holbox. Anyway, I met this couple in a hostel, and we just got along great. So we traveled right across to the other side of Mexico together. So that's the thing when you meet someone in a hostel. It's, in a way, when you're traveling by yourself, especially as a woman, you have those kinds of opportunities to meet people. And as I said before, you establish connections and friendships that are really solidified by the traveling. Because you and I know traveling is not always easy. It can be very stressful and difficult. It sounds like a dream life, but there's a lot of stress to it. And when you make these connections with people, they just seem to last. The issue about women versus men, like, don't worry about your man, I think because women do seem to be programmed differently and seem to make friends easier or more social. I don't know what it is. I think it's actually an advantage for a woman. I think guys are standoffish about meeting other guys and connecting with other guys. I don't know, but my sense is that's one of the advantages of being a woman, actually traveling on your own. So I see it as an advantage, not a disadvantage. About money, you never keep, like, I travel with 2 credit cards because sometimes one credit card doesn't work in the ATM, so you have a fallback and have another one. That's point 1. But point 2 is you never keep them both together because if they're going to get stolen, they're both getting stolen. This year I went to Spain and Portugal and we loved it, but it's not the same as when you can go to these indigenous groups and be a part of that. So this feeling of going back in time and being in a National Geographic movie, it's just phenomenal. It's like these cultures are frozen in time, and it's such a privilege to be part of them. Special memories.
So you tend to book ahead rather than just take each day as it comes? Is that the way you normally travel?
Chris, I have to tell you, I hated it because it was a lot of work, but we went to the Azores, Madeira, Spain and Portugal in April, May, June. The closer you get to the days, like it is possible, but you have no control over how much money you're spending. Anywhere in Europe now you're not the only one traveling. You have to remember that there's a lot of people traveling. So unless you have deep pockets, I think it makes more sense to book ahead.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I didn't like it. It happened actually to work out perfectly because I did a lot of research on every place that we were going to, and I had a fairly good feel, even though I was at a distance, for how much time I wanted to spend in each place, and it really worked out well. But I didn't like it because it took out all the spontaneity. You get to a place, you like it, you want to spend another 3 days. Well, you can't because you have reservations at XYZ on the first, second, and third. So that was the downside. The upside is everything was planned. I didn't have to look for accommodation and that. So in our upcoming trip to South America, we partly book things because, again, we're going to Patagonia in November and December. And Patagonia is a literal zoo now. It's like this undiscovered wilderness that everybody's discovered. So I wouldn't even want to go there in January, February, March. I read stories of people waiting for groups of people to move a little bit so they could take a picture of the glacier and the mountain. That's how crowded it is. Ask to belly button. So yeah, you bet your sweet Bippy I've booked for that part of the trip. I'm hoping that the rest of the trip works out.
Finally, how do you travel in terms of, do you travel light, backpack?
I travel with an Osprey 40. So it's
Right.
40 liters. Because we want to be able to check our luggage in, check it at, carry on. And the Osprey 40 meets the carry-on sizes. The only other thing I take is a collapsible backpack, a day pack for day outing.
Well, thanks very much, Ellen, for taking the time to share your experiences and tips. That's much appreciated. Thank you.